sector, from agri-food systems on the ground, and to also hear from the wider community that we are working with. So before we move into the panel, I would like to briefly introduce what NGIN is and what we are doing at the Future Generation Corner. So NGIN stands for the Next Generation Ag Impact Network. It's a network of youth innovators, agripreneurs, farmers, researchers, and also organizations. So it's a foundation that is directly enabling young people working on the ground and across the entire value chain to directly engage at global forums like this and take the conversations happening at the summit back to the soil. So we're trying to have this bilateral dialogue with experts, with business leaders, with governments and funders and financiers, and trying to get them connected to people, young people on the ground, to bring action into reality and to also progress the conversations that we are having at forums like the World Seed Congress. So let's get straight into action and hear from three amazing young dynamic leaders that we have here. We have Daniel, who's a young farmer from Wales. Next we have Nathaniel, who's a young farmer and now a plant science researcher from Nigeria. And we have Beate, who is doing her master's in international relations and human rights and focuses a lot more on social inclusion of women and youth. So let's get going. So maybe Daniel, I'll start with you. You're one of the NGIN ambassadors,
yes.
And as part of this initiative, we've been talking to a lot more young people from different parts of the world and to understand what they expect from the seed sector and the World Seed Congress. So you have worked on a joint advocacy statement. So can you please walk us through some of the key messaging that came out of this joint?
Yeah, so the joint advocacy statement was something that we co-created, the NGIN cohort, and we tried to identify the major issues, basically, that are happening in agriculture, but also those that the youth could meaningfully be involved in. So the first one we did was seed saving for climate adaptation, and obviously climate change is one of the most pressing issues that the youth are facing currently, and we need to be able to develop the seeds of the future. We then had actually investing in young people. So youth actually have quite low participation in agriculture currently, so how do we invest in the future farmers and the future seed savers of the future? We then looked at, whilst we know and we have the blueprints for regenerative agriculture, how do we actually apply that in real world? So we need to be action orientated, not just theory based. We then looked at what are the wild plants doing for us, so how do we utilize our wild cultivars and use those in new genome editing and things like that. We then looked into, again, sort of how do we improve the genetic variety of the crops we've got going at the minute. So we've lost 75% of our genetic diversity in crops, so how do we safeguard that, involving the youth? And then another thing we looked at was how do we preserve the cultural heritage of some of our agricultural societies, and the youth are often key in that, because if we lose that connection to our youth, then how do we pass that generationally down below them? And then the last thing we harped on, so the last of the 8 points, was women farmers. So women make up 50% of the world of farmers, but they have very low participation, and this is very true for the United Kingdom as well. Only about 20% of our farmers are women, so really low youth participation in that, and how can we improve that? So yeah, that was a quick run through of some of the things we identified in the joint youth advocacy statement.
Thank you, Daniel. I think I'm hearing a lot of areas where the seed sector is also potentially interested, and a key priority for them coming up in some of the strategies like exploring underutilized crops, local cultivars, building more climate resilience, and also integrating young farmers and women and recognizing the role that they play. So just a very quick follow-up, what role do you think young people can realistically play? Because sometimes innovation is a long cycle, it takes time.
Yeah.
What can we do? How can we get the ball rolling as quickly as possible?
I think young people really need to be integrated into companies, especially seed sector, and I think that's part of succession planning. So if you're running a business in the seed sector, you want to be looking at who's going to take over after I'm gone, and who's going to promote the work I want and keep the key messages going. So yeah, just integrate youth into the company at, at every level if you can.
Yeah, I think that's an important call to action, and also to maintain the viability of these companies moving forward, because they need young talent, young leaders. So thank you so much, Daniel. Moving to you, Nathaniel. A lot of these discussions that we are having right now at a massive platform like the World Seed Congress are very global, but you have seen realities on the ground. At the same time, you have transitioned to be a plant science researcher working now in Germany. So according to you, what's happening on ground? What are some of these realities that we might be missing out on, or we need to also re-emphasize and reiterate that these are potentially linked to the seed sector?
Yeah, so some of the challenges that we're seeing on ground is that farmers are increasingly facing some of the effect of climate change, and this especially affects like smallholder farmers because they can actually be reduced yield. And again, we see that it's possible that there's increase in agricultural input, and because of this, we see that farmers are under a lot of pressure to produce more under unstable condition. Again, we see that there's difficulty assessing quality seeds, but even consistently. And even where this accessibility happens, we see that farmers still have to bridge a gap between availability and affordability. And when it comes to new innovation, we see that there's a lot of mistrust or even a lack of understanding surrounding new innovation. And for example, we see that when it comes to even treated seeds, we see that there's a lot of mistrust and even policies that limits the use of treated seeds. And we see that this is not like there's no innovation, there's innovation, but the challenge here is if there's reliability, whether there's trust among farmers. Again, we also see that, which is equally important, is that many young people are actually leaving agriculture, and we think that this is a big challenge because they are often not seeing a future in it. We are lacking because they don't think that there's a future in agriculture. And I think this is a bigger challenge on the agricultural sector, because for us to be able to have a global resilient future, I think more young people need to be included in agriculture. But despite all of this, it's good to say that we see that a lot of farmers are incredibly resilient and innovative themselves, because we see that they are constantly adapting, innovating, experimenting, making difficult decisions under unstable conditions. And I think this is why conversations like this are important in global forum like this.
So Nathaniel, what you're implying is the strength is there, the resilience is there, and innovation and allies in the seed sector are there, but we're missing the communication. We are missing the messaging and reaching to the right communities. So just a very quick follow-up, how do we make the seed sector more sexy again for young people? How do we, how can they support us, or how can this conversation be bilateral?
Yeah, so I think it's clear that farmers are not only asking for high-yielding varieties, they're asking for reliability, resilience, affordability, and trust. And I think for the seed sector, it's critical that there's an opportunity to deepen collaborations among generations, among disciplines, and even young farmers, and even local communities. So moving forward, I think supporting this transition will require not only innovation in breeding, but a stronger listening, accessibility, trust, and even deepening conversations within farmers and local communities.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel. Moving on to you, Beate. You're someone who has been working in the social side of things. Something that is missing when we have conversations about seed is often technical, scientific, or business related, but we don't talk too much about the social side of things. And today we've been hearing a lot of conversation about joint action, innovation, resilience, and how collaboration is important to make this an intergenerational process. So from your perspective, what does meaningful collaboration look like, and what does this term mean, and how can we enable it in the future?
So I think for me the first step for any meaningful collaboration, but in this case meaningful youth collaboration, is really representation and visibility. So really what we're doing right now, that we are here present at this forum as young people sitting on this stage and being able to speak and let our perspective be heard. Because I think it's important for other young people to see themselves represented in these kinds of settings, to also believe that they have a place in these kinds of global forums and also the organizations that are part of this, and that their voices are important and their perspective is important to be heard. And then beyond that, I think exactly what you said, when we're talking about these kinds of topics, we're often really focusing on like the hard side of things, so the technical innovation, the finance, but then we forget a little bit that there's a lot of social changes and developments that are needed to even get to that point. So also from my experience, I've seen it's very important, for example, participation and representation in decision making, more positive communication like Nathaniel also mentioned, but also more vibrant and resilient rural communities, and in general just more opportunities for fulfilling and attractive lives for young people in rural settings, because otherwise, yeah, they're not going to come to the rural areas and they're not going to join the agri-food sector either. So yeah, I think we often forget about those parts, just like you mentioned. So yeah, but I think it's very fundamental that we also focus on those social aspects. Yeah.
So my key takeaway from this would be the doors need to open up more. And we need more role models, more communication, and more young people to be showcased and highlighted and celebrated, so that work can continue in the future and innovation can be taken over from what's happening currently into the next generation. So we got three incredible perspectives, one from a collective, one from a farmer on the ground, and you from a social perspective. And also because we have a diverse bunch of audience here, we have people from the seed sector, some leaders, some scientists, and some working on policy. So I would like to do a quick rapid fire where what is one key message that you want people here to leave and remember and take back to their settings so that they can have a conversation about it. So in a quick 15-20 second, Daniel, starting with you.
I would say if you really care about youth participation and the future of your company, I would say you really need to integrate youth voice into the company at decision-making level as soon as you can. There you go.
Nathaniel?
Yeah, I think for me, I think a quick takeaway is that the future of agriculture will depend on whether youth see themselves if you see a future in it. And I think that this is more important because it helps them to work more closely.
Beate?
Yeah, I hope people walk away from here and think of youth inclusion not as a separate topic in agriculture, but as something that is an integral part of everything that's happening in this sector, in the seed sector or the agri-food sector more broadly. There's really no future without youth inclusion. So yeah, we should really focus on that, I think.
Thank you so much to the three of you. I think these conversations are not just relevant at a global platform like this, but also for companies working at a national level on the ground to start having these conversations with young people, with young women, and to understand how the gap can be bridged and how a lot of opportunities can be taken. A lot of young talent can be integrated into the system, and a lot of training and miscommunication can also be resolved with the right tools for communication. So I think the future of seeds and farming, really depends on how we all come together, how we all collaborate, and at the same time, how we leave the doors open to co-create with women, with young farmers, with youth working as researchers across the globe, people working in policy, agripreneurs, and so many other roles that young people are already playing right now. But I think that recognition and that mapping is really important. So the opportunity now is to build a stronger and inclusive and collaborative system. And most importantly, the biggest takeaway here would be the conversations from the soil need to reach the summit, and the conversation at the summit need to go back to the soil. With that hope, with that aspiration and that ambition, NGIN and all the ambassadors that are present at the Seed Congress are always happy to have a conversation. Feel free to reach out to us at the Intergenerational Corner. There are a lot of sessions planned. We'll also pop up at many of the sessions and panels to give our perspectives. So we're happy to keep the conversation going and the ball rolling. And I hope this conversation continues beyond the Congress, beyond Lisbon, and back to our countries, back to our districts, back to our cities, as local as possible, and we make it a bottoms-up approach. So let's make the seed sector sexy again for young people. I think that's a good call to action to have, while all the crucial work that the seed companies and the sector is doing to be great allies to farmers continues. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for tuning in to this Channel World session. This was the NGIN Prime session, and we are NGIN ambassadors, young people from across the globe, and we are here to learn and we are here to teach. Thank you so much.
Thank you.